I remember years ago, I went to the market to buy a phone case, yes. And the phone case was not for me, it was for one of my superiors. And I had called him while I was in the market to confirm the kind of phone he was using and what kind of case he wanted, because I had options. The seller in the market heard me having the conversation, and when I made my choice on the particular phone case, he now said, okay, well, it's time for him to give me a receipt because I needed receipts so that I can show my superior. And he asked me a question, what figure should I put on the receipt? I'm like, what do you mean, what figure should you put on? How much is this case? Well, he said, no, sir, I said, how much is it? He said, wait. Well, at that time, it was 5,000. He said, should he put 7,000? I'm like, why are you putting 7,000? Apparently, unbeknown to me, one of the ways they do this thing is people bump prices up in order to get their money and all, to get money from making third-party purchases. And I left that place with a better understanding of how corruption works, because he asked me the question, and I never thought about it. But by asking me the question if I needed to put like a plus 2,000 naira charge on the receipt, and again, my superior would never have known. I would have just said yes, because 2,000 naira would have solved one or two things here and there. But at least, thanks be to God, I said no. But I thought about it deeply, that many people, even myself, maybe it was just a good day. Maybe I just had said my prayers that day, and I didn't fall victim of that. Right? But when we find ourselves in those situations, I plead that we think. Now, the problem is that when the lights fade, sometimes it may never come back on. Sometimes. When you descend into the depths of hell, the depths of immorality, your consciousness dies. And sometimes you may never get that ability, to see the world for what it is. In 2020, I stumbled upon what they call the slave Bible. It's very interesting. And basically, the Bible we all know, Holy Bible, was used as a tool to keep people enslaved. And they removed some part of the scripture and emphasized some other part of the scripture to keep the black people in America enslaved. And what I found interesting was a lot of Christians at that time in America had slaves. And they didn't see it as something bad. It was just, black people are subhuman. So it wasn't a conversation of, it wasn't a battle against conscience. It was just simply, this is the world we are born into, this is the world we are going to keep up. But again, Abraham Lincoln comes in and sees that human beings, regardless of the shade of your skin, have an intrinsic value, and it is equal across all races. And then the Civil War happened, and emancipation and all whatnot. But we're not going into that particular historical event. So Kant built his entire moral philosophy on one foundational belief: that human beings are rational, free, dignified, and these three things are inseparable. Because we are rational, we can always think. Because we are free, we can always choose. And because we are dignified, we are always responsible to ourselves and to every other human beings whose dignity we encounter. The men of the Reserve Police Battalion 101 were rational. They were free and dignified. Milligram's participants were rational. They were free and were dignified. Zimbardo's guards were rational, free, and dignified. Out of each man was rational, free, and dignified. And because they were all those things, they were responsible fully, personally, for what they did. Which means, regardless of the fact that you fall victim of peer pressure, authority, or whatever it is, you are also always going to be responsible for the outcomes of your decision. I went to Covenant. So we heard this quote a lot of times in school, and it was by David Oyedepo. And he said, you're totally responsible for the outcome of your life. And he said that knowing fully well that a lot of people believed that the outcome of their life is heavily responsible on God. So if my life didn't turn out well, don't blame me. Blame God, because if God was here, my life would have had a better outcome. And the reason he said that is that every particular decision you make, makes you, which means every time you make a decision, the outcome of that decision feedbacks loop into making who you are or who you're going to be. So all of us, every day, when we encounter people, when we encounter systems, we must realize three things, and I'm wrapping up, is the first, the universality test. What I am doing, if everyone does this, will the world be a better place? Number two is humanity should be the goal, should not be treated as a means only. Regardless of how pressured you are, and you will be pressured, there's always going to be a way, the light that guides you away from committing things that either questions your morality, questions your faith, or questions your conscience. Your conscience. The 12 men who stepped out of the police battalion kept the light on. The participants who refused the Milgram's authority figure kept the light on. There are a lot of people who walked away from Zimbabwe's basement and they kept the light on. These were ordinary people like me and you. They faced the same pressures as anyone else, and they chose, as Kant always insisted, we can always choose, regardless of the corner you're thinking, regardless of how pressured you are, they chose to remain fully human, fully thinking, and fully responsible. We're not asking you to be heroes. This model doesn't ask you to be a hero. They're not asking you to be perfect, because we all are not perfect. I would fail one way or the other in this universality test of which I speak of, because I'm human. But we must have this as some form of North Star when we are going through times where it is not clearly black or white. So, Model 1, we gave a lot of case study. How evil people, how good people unconsciously uphold evil. I gave 4 scenarios. We told you thinking was a solution. We brought Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy showed us how absolute morality thrives against relative morality. Showed you the tests that you can take, the questions, practical questions you can ask yourself. And in the coming days and in the coming years, you will keep finding yourself in this position. You are going to one day be presidents and CEOs and leaders of different fields. And you're always going to find yourself making those impactful decisions that may affect the lives of many people. But before you get to those high positions, you will find yourself in the market. You find yourself in a small office space. You find yourself in one-on-one interactions with the gatesman, with the security guard. And if you are not aware that if you're not aware that the little lies you tell or the little default in morality can lead to something that can make you or lead to something worse, then by the time you become a political figure, or a useful figure, or a big figure, we would have lost you, either to your own self or to the evil ways that presents itself every single time. So, we're going to look at Module 3. And Module 3 speaks, the title is quite frankly, The World and Its Spells. And there we zoom into Nietzsche and how the head mentality, how to break away from the head mentality, how to stand out, especially when you need to, and how above all else, to not lose your individuality in the collective. Thank you all so much.
Okay, so the impact I've learned from that session was about how individuality is not really like all that, because we are mostly influenced by peer pressure and other people. So it makes up like most of our subconscious decisions.
Hello everyone, my name is Helen, and so far I've learned that everybody has a choice, good or bad, and that everybody has a free will. and they can actually decide how they will actually act.